Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Today, we're having a presentation with the Ohio Arts Council. We're going to be discussing grants and programs available to all of you around the state of Ohio. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over a couple quick things with everyone. First, we're going to be taking questions at the end of today's program, but if you have questions, when you have them, just type them into the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll get those answered for you once we get to the end of the presentation. But if as you have them, please just type them in so you don't forget what the questions that you have. Second of all, if you have any issues that pop up during the webinar, best thing you can do is just click the link that was sent to you, re-sign into the webinar. That solves 99% of the problems people are experiencing. So if sound is seemingly weird, slides don't seem to be advancing, just click that link that was sent to you, and that usually will solve your problems. Before we get started, I want to introduce our three presenters today. First with us today, we have Brianna Dance, who has administered public funding of the arts for the state of Ohio since 2011. She currently serves as the Ohio Arts Council's Organizational Programs Coordinator for the Central and Southeast regions of Ohio. Also with us today, we have Patrick Roehrenbeck. He is the Ohio Arts Council's Organizational Program Coordinator for the Northeast Ohio region. And finally, with us, we have Jim Szekacs, and he is the Organizational Grants Program Coordinator for Western and North Central regions of Ohio. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Brianna to get things started. Thank you.
Thank you, Devin, and thank you to Heritage Ohio for the invitation. We are very happy to be here. As you said, I'm Brianna Dance, and I'm one of three staff members who coordinate grants for organizations at the Ohio Arts Council. In this webinar, you'll also hear from those colleagues, Jim Szekacs and Patrick Roehrenbeck, as we share funding opportunities and a few grant writing best practices. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to move quickly, starting with a bit about the Ohio Arts Council. So first, we are a state agency. Our mission is to fund and support quality arts experiences to strengthen Ohio communities culturally, educationally, and economically. A central part of our work is investing in our state's arts and culture sector through grants. So we receive funding from the state legislature, and thanks to the governor and state legislators, we have received record-setting state appropriations for the past few biennia. In the current biennium, 51 million was appropriated for the Ohio Arts Council. That, along with 2.5 million of federal funding from the National Endowment for the Arts, made 2,600 grant awards possible. Here is an overview of all the 14 grant programs that we offer. I believe Devin will be sending a link here that provides an overview of all these grants here in the chat. Thank you, Devin. So we like to color coordinate at the Ohio Arts Council based on the audience served. So in green, you'll see grants available to organizations. In purple, you'll see grants specifically for arts education activities. And then in yellow are our grants for artists. Each category has a dedicated team at the OAC that help coordinate these grants. Today, we are just going to focus on our project and operating support categories since those are the most relevant to our audience today. But if you're interested in learning more about our arts learning or artist grants, we are happy to put you in touch with the team that coordinates those. But before we get started discussing some of those grants, I want to put accessibility at the forefront because it is very important to the OAC. And when I talk about accessibility, I mean creating access to people with disabilities. 1 in every 3 to 4 people in Ohio have a disability. We want all Ohioans to be able to engage in the arts. These are public dollars, and we don't want a barrier to prevent or limit involvement. So we encourage our applicants to consider how they can provide accommodations to ensure people with disabilities can take part. And of course, it's more than just having a venue with ramps or accessible parking. It could be hiring an ASL interpreter or live streaming your event or offering touch tours. In the arts, we're known for our creativity. So I encourage all of us to use that to ideate some solutions. Okay, so now a question that we get a lot is who is eligible? What type of organization can apply? So, eligible groups can include nonprofits or government entities. It can also be educational organizations like schools and universities. But it's important to keep in mind that those educational organizations must have a commitment to serving the wider community beyond just their students in order to be eligible for these organizational grants. But for-profits are not eligible. Um, so now you know who can apply. Let me connect you with your main contact here at the OAC. So as I've mentioned, there are three of us that work with grants that we're discussing today. We divide the state into three regions with a designated grants coordinator. So do not be a stranger if you plan on seeking funding and are unsure where to start or have questions along the way. I work with those in Central and Southeast Ohio. Patrick Roehrenbeck works with the Northeast region, and Jim Szekacs covers Western and North Central. And speaking of which, Jim is now going to walk you through a few grant programs. So take it away, Jim.
Glad to do so. Thank you, Brianna. I am, of course, the aforementioned Jim Szekacs. Let's talk a little bit about the grants that we have, specifically project support grant categories. You'll see the list of them here. I will talk about the first three of these, and then Patrick will chime in on the latter two. But let's start with Art Start, appropriately named. It's a grant program that pretty much fits everybody. New organizations can come in through this grant category for just about any kind of routine um, grant project. It could be a mural, it could be in-house arts programming and arts education, this sort of thing. Art Start, you can request up to $5,000, but you do have to show a one-to-one match, as is the case for the other grant categories. And by match, I mean a cash match. It doesn't include the in-kind. But rest assured, at the time of application, you can have either confirmed or anticipated match, or if you're a presenting organization, you can anticipate match from earned revenues and ticket sales, that sort of thing. It's the most flexible. We fund most broadly through this category. It's a good point of entry. The deadline is April 1st of every year. So this deadline's coming up here in a week or two. If you're interested, I urge you to take a look at it. So for the next grant category, we will be talking about, and there we go, Arts Next is our next grant category. Flip that thing. Bear with us here. There we go. So this is a grant category that this deadline has passed, unfortunately, back on February, rather March 1st. But it's a great category to start planning for, because this is a category that will ask the applicant organization to kind of stretch themselves to do innovative things, um, to do things that have an element of risk, but is not routine, not an embellishment of things you currently do, like you're going to add an element. It's really just about doing new, innovative sorts of things. You can request up to $25,000 in this grant category. The hurdle's a little higher for funding, but if you do, it's a great category. It'll cover a lot of expenses. We're encouraging you to fail forward or succeed. It is, like I said, a one-to-one match, cash match requirement. The deadline, again, March 1 every year. Our next category. Here it is, Arts Rise. This is one of our newer grant programs. It's very similar to Arts Start, with the exception that we're asking you to, a couple of things, but we're asking you to serve or to reach out to underserved groups of individuals in your community. We have some examples here. You do programming that reaches BIPOC communities, people who have disabilities, folks in rural and urban populations that are low-income communities, folks in the LGBTQ plus community, veterans, justice impacted, and Appalachian-centered programming. So this is a programming that has a kind of a purpose. You can request up to $5,000. And here's the thing that's really good about this program. If your operating budget as an organization is under 100,000, you don't have a match requirement. It's great if you can show it. That gives us a totality of your project administration, but it doesn't require a match if you're under 100,000. Those who are over 100,000, you do have a one-to-one cash match. It's also a rolling deadline, for a lack of a better term. These applications open up only back in March. And in April, we're going to start processing them and sending them out to a panel that we have on retainer, and we send them out in batches. So if you don't get it on April 1st, you can keep submitting them to us through the end of September or until the funds run out. It's important to know that in the last couple of years, funds did run out in late August. So even if your project is in June of 2026, you want to make sure that you get the request in sooner rather than later. And as such, the other thing is if you do apply to us, we do require that you submit the application no later than 90 days before the start of your project. And again, these are FY26 projects, so projects can start no sooner than July of this 2025. Without further ado, I will introduce Patrick, and he will talk about the remaining project grant categories. Here you go, Patrick.
Thank you, Jim. Can everyone hear me? We've been having some issues with my computer, so I'm glad you all can hear me. Thank you again, Jim. So now it's time to talk about our operating support grants. The OAC divides its operating support grants into two categories: sustainability and statewide arts service organizations. Today, we're going to focus on the Sustainability Grant Program. The Sustainability Grant Program has a 4-year grant cycle and funds a wide variety of expenses in the general operations of an organization. This can include general artistic or administrative expenses, along with, but not limited to, marketing, program planning, evaluation, education. Just a reminder, there are some expenses that can't be supported by the OAC funds, like hospitality, fundraising efforts, and others. We recommend you take a look at all the restrictions by checking out our guidelines appendices on our grants information and guidelines page. And I think we're going to be adding that link to the chat, so that'll take you right there. There are specific requirements organizations must meet to be eligible to apply to the Sustainability Grant Program. One of the significant requirements is developing a grant history with the OAC. To be eligible to apply to the Sustainability Grant Program, an organization must have 2 competitive peer panel reviewed grant awards within the 4 years leading up to the open application year. These competitive grant programs include our Art Start, Arts Next, Arts Rise, and Arts Partnership grant programs. All the information I've been talking about can be found in the sustainability guidelines on our website, and that link's going to go in there too. It's www.oac.ohio.gov/grants. Now let's talk about how you apply. So all the OAC grant applications are completed through our online grant platform, Artie. If you have any questions about your Artie account, please contact your grant coordinator, and they will work with you to make sure your account is ready to go. Some of you may already have accounts in Artie, some of you may not. Again, you need to have an account in Artie, and then you also have to have your personal contact profile account in there also. And like I said, contact either Jim, Brianna, or I, and we will gladly work with you to make sure that your Artie account is up and ready to go. And now I'd like to, I'm sorry. The OAC also offers several programs and services for individual artists. Since many of you work with individual artists or may find yourself in need of an artist, we would like to focus on the Ohio Artist Registry. The Ohio Artist Registry is a database of artists that includes short bios and work samples of artists throughout the entire state. This is a great place for you to search if you are in need of an artist, to work on a project that you're presenting or producing. And it's just a great way to get to know what artists and and what art is being made in your area. Next, the OAC has opportunities for individuals and organizations to stay informed of and engaged with what is going on in the arts around the state of Ohio in a variety of ways. We offer our webinar series. The OAC facilitates free webinars on a variety of topics, including OAC grant programs, social media, marketing best practices, business principles for artists and organizations, and much more. We also have our Governor's Awards, which celebrates artistic excellence in 7 categories, including Ohio artists, arts organizations, arts patrons, and business support of the arts. The Governor's Awards is now a biennial award program, and that occurs on the odd number years. So this year, 2025, will be a Governor's Awards year for the Ohio Arts Council. Another way that we engage and offer opportunities for Ohioans and Ohio organizations is through our Arts Impact Ohio. Arts Impact Ohio is OAC's biennial professional development conference for arts administrators, arts educators, and individual artists. And unlike our Governor's Awards, this occurs on the even numbered years. So every year, the Ohio Arts Council has something offered to you. For more information on these opportunities, go to our community engagement section of the OAC website, and all the information that we're talking about when it comes to opportunities around the state can be found there. So now I'd like to bring it back to Brianna to continue the discussion.
Thank you, Patrick. So I am going to spend just a quick minute walking you through our grant process, and I am going to break it down into 3 phases. So let's start with how you can best prepare, and it starts with the guidelines. Always review the guidelines first. Each grant has guidelines that provides an overview about the program, eligibility information, and project examples. If you're not sure if your funding need is a fit or where to apply, contact our staff. We know how much time goes into preparing an application, so that's why we encourage all of our applicants to talk with the grants coordinator prior to applying so that we can confirm eligibility and connect you with the grant program that's the most appropriate fit. From there, you'll then create or update your ARTI profile and get started on an application. Keep in mind that your profile must be complete at the time you submit an application, so make sure to work on that while preparing your proposal. And also, side note, applicants have the option to request feedback on a draft of their application, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. Once your application is complete, go ahead and submit, ideally ahead of the deadline, and then that will lead us to our next phase, which is the review phase. Our staff reviews all the applications for eligibility. If we notice any issues, we'll reach out to you for clarification or additional action. And if you get that request, please promptly respond. Then all of the eligible applicants are sent to panelists for their review and scoring, and the panel meetings are open to the public. So we actually encourage applicants to listen to their panel review, which is held virtually. Within a week of the panel, application scores are released, so you'll know how well you fared, but you won't officially know until our board meets to review and approve those funding recommendations, as the board is the only body authorized to make funding decisions. All right, so if you're awarded funding, and let's hope you are, here's what happens next. You'll sign a grant agreement, and most of our grantees will receive, or they can request, a portion of their award at that time. And of course, we're proud to support your work, so we require that our grantees credit our funding and publicize their award. So be sure to include our logo on all your promotional materials, and then you're ready to carry out your project. If anything changes, keep us apprised. After your project's complete, you'll submit a final report in ARTI, and then we'll issue out any remaining balance on your award. And that's the full grant life cycle. Now, switching gears, I'm going to take a quick breath because I know we've covered a lot, but hopefully you found something that clicks with your work or your plans. But we know that, many of our applicants are not professional grant writers. So we want to touch on some grant writing 101 tips. And you'll notice the theme here. First and foremost, the first tip is to read the program guidelines carefully. They provide all the details that you need to know about the program, including the exact review criteria that we give panelists to score your application. And when you start an application, you'll notice that its narrative questions are just the review criteria posed in question form. So we're giving you the answers to the test up front, so it's really critical to address every question. All right, the second best practice is to collaborate with a small committee on your program and budget. Now, calling it a committee may sound more formal than it needs to be, but just have a team of folks that bring their area of expertise to the table. And your planning process should be inclusive of a wide range of voices, ideally including the community that you plan to serve. As a result, your proposal will be well-rounded and well thought out with all those perspectives in mind. But also your budget is just as important as your narrative. It gives the panel important information about the size and scope of your activities. So present a realistic budget that includes all the related expenses and aligns with the activities described in your narrative. All right, next is to provide a clear, detailed narrative about your project. So these grants are reviewed by people working in the arts from all over the state. So it's critical to approach your application with the assumption that the panelists do not have any knowledge of your organization or your community. So treat your application as an introduction to a stranger and summarize the who, what, where, when, why in the provided summary section. That will really set the stage for the rest of your grant proposal. Now, another important part of your application is your support materials. When you get started in the application in ARTI, you'll see a list of strongly encouraged support materials for you to consider. And if any of those are relevant to your proposed activities, include them. Panelists are typically given on average around 40 applications to review and score. So the easier you make it for them to find the information they need, the better. So make sure to label your files appropriately. And on the flip side, be sure not to overwhelm them with too many files. Panelists will not have time to read every word and every piece of support material. So if there's critical information that the panel should absolutely know, be sure to include in your application narrative instead of it being hidden in a support material. If you're unsure about anything, our staff is here to help. And one of the ways we help is by reviewing draft applications. So I mentioned this earlier. Applicants can request feedback on an application draft where we, the coordinators, will review your proposal and provide suggestions based on our experience listening to past panels. That option is available in ARTI until 2 weeks before the deadline. So be sure to request feedback on your draft sooner than later. But if you miss that window, you haven't lost your support line. We're available right up until deadline day if you have any specific questions. And last but not least, proofread. Typos often distract panelists. They occasionally happen. They don't need to happen. Even better, if you can ask someone outside your organization to review your application, that would be wonderful because remember, that's mimicking the perspective that the panelist will have since they'll be unfamiliar with work. So try to choose someone who's unfamiliar with your organization and work, and of course, they can help catch some of those typos along the way too. All right, before I conclude with a thank you, because I know we have a few minutes, I'm going to backtrack. I noticed we skipped a couple of grant programs because we got so excited. So I'm going to go back and bring up Jim. If you don't mind, we realized we skipped over a few. So I'm going to go back to capacity building and Ohio Artists on Tour. So Jim, would you mind taking it away before we thank everybody and take any questions?
Yeah, and I think this is okay to that we get to it at this point too, because this particular program, capacity building, it's not about programming output like the other grants are, like Operating Support or Arts Start or Arts Next. This is really about you focusing on your organization. So, for example, if you want to do professional development, if you want to bring in a consultant to help you do strategic planning, a marketing plan, not the marketing, but the plan, But if you have a narrow planning, a scope of activities, a single activity preferably, or if you want to send staff to a professional development conference, this grant can pay for half of the costs, the outside costs. It's not to supplant staff or the contract staff, but it's about bringing in a third-party consultant to help you do what you do better, to provide deliverables that will live on after their project is gone. So this will fund half of those costs, up to $5,000. It's a really good grant to help you grow as an organization. I know we have a lot of emerging organizations that could use some funding to help them develop. And finally, the next one is Ohio Artists on Tour. Again, this is not about the normal grant programs, but if you have a grant, a project grant, a sustainability operating support grant, Arts Next or Arts Start, and you're a presenting organization that regularly presents performances or performing artists, this grant category is supplemental to what you do. So if you have an Ohio-based artist, a performing group, and you want to bring them in and have a signed contract by both parties, this will supplement a degree of the costs up to $10,000, 1/3 of the fee for that performing artist, or up to $15,000 for a number of performing artists. But you have to have a grant currently or anticipating one in the upcoming year. You have to have that application and already turned in by May 15th, and it's the same deadline every year. It's a great way to supplement what you do as an organization. And with that, let's turn it back over to Brianna.
Thank you. It wouldn't be a live webinar without a few little things like that. But I just want to end by saying, thank you. We really appreciate you sharing your lunch hour with us. Hopefully you found a grant that connects to the work you're doing. And I think there's some time we are happy to answer any questions that the audience may have.
Thank you all. So if you do have questions, please start typing those into the chat box now. Take a short commercial break here just to thank the Ohio Department of Development for helping finance webinars like these for our organization. I'm about to put in everyone's contact info into the chat so everyone has those. Patrick graciously typed it out in an answer a few moments ago, so I can just copy and paste it so everyone has it now. So there's a couple questions Patrick was answering directly to people, but I think they're good questions for the whole group. So Patrick, I'm going to ask these to you now, so be prepared. Can an organization apply for both Arts Start and Arts Rise for the same project? And could funding be allocated from both?
Okay, so organizations are eligible to apply to multiple grant programs within the Ohio Arts Council's portfolio, but they have to be for independent projects or programs. There cannot be two grant awards cannot go to support the same project because there cannot be that overlapping funding. So if you're applying to the Arts Start, it should be for one program. If you're going to apply to Arts Rise, it should be to another project or program that's completely different from the Arts Start.
Thank you, Patrick. Next question here is from Mary Lou. Can the panel provide an example of projects that have been completed under the Arts Next grants?
Sure, I can share a few. So we had a printmaking organization request funding to invent an eco-friendly printmaking process, and they've had visiting artists come from all over the world to learn their green methods to then adopt into their print shops. But, with Arts Next, what I would say is, innovation can also be relative. So what's innovative in one community is completely different than another. So an example of this is we had a community art center in an area where there was actually a ban on public art, and they worked with their city council to reverse that policy, that ban, and they created their first community mural on the side of a building. So it was, not something innovative. Murals are not necessarily innovative in and of themselves, but because it was disrupting the community's previous policies and launching the beginning of a creative placemaking effort, it's a wonderful example of an Arts Next project. hopefully that helps.
I think a good answer. Next question here. Can you confirm the one-to-one match? For example, if an organization is awarded $5,000, the organization match is also $5,000.
Sure, I can do that. That's essentially it. You have to have either anticipated or confirmed cash match or sources of funding from other donors, or you can anticipate earned revenue. So if you're requesting five, you'll want to show five from other sources or a combination of sources. Doesn't include in kind, which is not a cash donation, but more of a in lieu of cash or a donated or discounted service or product. But yeah, that's essentially how the match will work.
Thanks, Jim.
Mhm.
Is there a limit to how many OAC grants an organization is eligible for in a one-year cycle?
Sure, I'll take that one. Is
I
there
was gonna, I don't want you to have to do it all, Brianna.
go for it if you want
Okay.
to. Go for it.
No, I mean, we'll just go around the circle here.
Round
Um,
robin.
well, when you look at the guidelines, depending on what grant awards you've received, there is not a so-called limit. Again, you just can't use multiple OAC grant awards to support the same project. Now, we were talking about our project support and our sustainability. Our goal is to try to get everyone into sustainability because that's that good general use of money that the Arts Council can award. As a sustainability grantee, there are some grant awards you're not eligible, programs you're eligible for. You're not eligible for the Art Start grant program for that. Um, but if as long as you are applying to the grant programs and they are for independent projects, so unique projects to each other, you can apply to all the project support grants.
Thanks, Patrick.
Mhm.
Next question here. Brianna alluded to this a little bit. What are the biggest missteps when applying for your grants? You mentioned several times that people need to ensure they read and adhere to grant guidelines. So obviously adhere to grant guidelines, but what other common problems do you see with applications?
Sure, that's a good one. I mean, I think so a lot of the missteps I feel like could have been avoided if we just had a conversation with a coordinator first. So I feel like some of it's eligibility stuff. Like, as I mentioned, we know writing and preparing an application is a lot of work. So that's why we encourage you to have a conversation with us first. So that way we can connect you to the most appropriate grant program because we want to set you up for success, right? We want to make sure that you're in the grant program that's the best fit for what you're looking funding for. And of course, we can kind of bring our experience of listening to past panels and kind of give you some feedback and some suggestions. So that would always be like just have a conversation with us first, and applying to the right program is the best. I would say, especially as an Arts Next applicant, if you're interested in that one, because we've have a history of panelists finding some things innovative and not, and we can kind of bring our perspective of listening to those panels to your application for any grant program, but especially that particular one.
And I'll just add a little something too. And it's getting a little bit into the weeds about it too much. Brianna's right. Just have the conversation. But in addition to looking at funding restrictions located in our appendices, which are also posted and linked to every guideline for every program, just know that these applications are scored by panelists, and it would be a misstep not to directly answer the bulleted questions that come after the summary question, because those bullets are 5 points apiece. So if you make it really easy for a panelist to find that scoring criteria in your answer, it helps you a lot. You're not leaving points on the table.
Thank you all. A couple questions here about more capital improvements. So I'm going to just combine these into one long question here, just so you can answer them both because they're pretty similar. Are there any OAC grants for capital improvements for a facility? And let me scroll down to the next one. Are there any grants that can be used for brick and mortar restoration of landmarks?
I could, since I'm the capacity building guy, no, we don't fund capital improvements. We can fund equipment purchases up to 1,500. That's why I mentioned earlier to read the funding restrictions and appendices. Now, landmarks, if they're considered a work of art, we do restoration projects, but you got to remember most of these grants require public access and have to be marketed to the public. So it's kind of tricky to show how that restoration project will score, to make it score well in an application. It's kind of a fine line. That's where the conversation that Brianna mentions comes in handy. A landmark that is a piece of art, like a statue or a mural, could have those public elements built into it. It is a restoration project and it's not technically capital. So let's have the conversation if that comes up.
Kind of on a related topic here. I'm going to kind of blur a couple ideas together from comments. Can you talk a little bit about some art adjacent projects that can be financed? Things like tour development for like a mural tour in a downtown, things like that.
Yeah, that's a good question. A big part of a lot of our grant programs, the programming ones, is how are you engaging the public in arts and culture? So if you're coordinating something that's engaging people in murals and learning about it or something of that, yes, you could certainly come and apply and request funding for something like that for sure.
And can you talk a little bit more about available educational programming grants? Specifically, the ones being asked about is for historic preservation, but I think this can apply to a lot of organizations broader than that on this webinar.
Repeat that question again for me,
Sure.
Devin. I want to make sure I understand it right.
Sure. So the person is asking about grants that are most applicable to educational programming, and they're specifically asking about historic preservation nonprofits. But I think, that's, a lot of downtown organizations that kind of educational component would apply to as well.
Sure, sure. So, a lot of our grant programs, one of the things that we're looking for is how is what you're doing providing educational, cultural, or artistic value. So, you know, Art Start is a great grant program. If you're interested in funding for some of the educational programming that you're looking to do related to historic preservation. Of course, I'm always happy to have a conversation offline to learn a little bit more of the specifics and all of that. But generally, I'd say, yes, yes, and let's all have a conversation and get you in the right place based on what you're looking to do.
Next question here is if our community has a local artist that isn't currently on the registry, how can we get them registered?
Oh, since I was the one that spoke about this, um, it's a pretty simple process. You can just go in and actually the best person to talk to about that would probably be Chaz O'Neill because he works with all of our individual artists. And he would be the one that can walk you through and guide you to be registered in Ohio Artist Registry. I know that they're always looking for new artists, new Ohio artists that are not on the registry to sign up and create their profile. Um, I will share. I'm going to share his contact information with you, Devin, so that you can share
Okay,
it with everyone else. And
perfect. Thanks, Patrick.
mhm.
Next question is kind of in a couple of parts, but essentially revolve around the same idea. Due to federal cuts, are any of the grants affected this year um, that have already been secured? And specifically, they're asking about the Arts Rise grant since it's involving DEI themes. Oh, Jim, you're muted.
Jim, you're muted.
Remain muted. Here we go. All right. So no, most of our budget, all but 6% is state funding. So Arts Rides is still a go. And we haven't changed anything. We haven't received any orders to change anything. So it's business as usual. The guidelines are what they are. So, go ahead and pursue that application if that's where you're going. And we'll be happy to talk to you. If there's any changes, we will notify everybody. So that's not a problem.
All right, a couple grant questions here. Patrick, can you expand on the sustainability grants a little bit more?
Okay, so our sustainability grant program is a grant program that supports all of the non-bells and whistles expenses that an organization has every year. So um, it it can support like D&O insurance or insurance and utilities and rents and everything like that. Um, the the important thing is to remember is to make sure that you meet those eligibility requirements and specifically having those two competitive peer panel grant awards within the 4 years leading up to the open application process. Now, we accept new applicants every 2 years. So this year was a year that we accepted. The next year that we're going to be accepting new applicants is in the spring of 2027. And we always accept our applications the fiscal year prior to when that grant cycle begins. So you'll be applying in 2027. And if you're awarded, barring any changes or anything, you'll the award will be for 4 years. So it'd be for 2028 through 2031. And it is whatever amount you're awarded that first year. There may be some minor adjustments to it, and that could be because our budget changes, your budget changes, things change, but it would be that same amount a year for 4 years. So whatever your grant award is, it's not divided by four, it's that amount a year for 4 years. The first year of that 4 year grant program is a full application. Years two, three, and four are just basically a paragraph update letting us know what you're doing that coming fiscal year, and then updated financial information. And that information is actually, it depends on which category you are. We have broken down our sustainability grant program into four sections. We have our large organizations, we have our mid-sized organizations, and then our small organizations. Our small organizations have budgets of $50,000 or less. Our mid-sized organizations are 50,000 or more, up to the top 40 budgets in the state. Um, am I forgetting something? Um, yeah, and that's really, I think, um, a goal for a lot of organizations is it's hard, it's difficult to find just general operating support for the work that you do. Most funders are looking for specific projects. Um, the Ohio Arts Council is unique by offering this general operating support grant program. So that's why we try to work with our organization to get them there because it um, is a step towards a little bit of fiscal stability because you can forecast a little better because you basically know what you're going to get for 4 years once you're awarded it. Um, and again, it pays for all the shiny, fireworksy expenses that organizations all have to do what they do.
Thanks, Patrick. This one, I guess all of you can answer, maybe in the ones that you covered. What are the respective grant limits for the various OAC program grants?
Sure. In terms of the request, they're stated in the guidelines for each program. So you're talking about Art Start is the request amount maxes at 5,000. So with a match requirement, that's another five. So you're looking at a $10,000 budget. For Arts Next, it's a $25,000 request limit. And for Arts Rise, it's a $5,000 request limit. Capacity building up to 5,000, but you have it only covers half the cost of the outside fees. And a higher artist on tour is kind of it's up to 10,000 for but it pays for a third of it. So you have to do the math on that. Um, am I missing anything, colleagues? You're,
Well, for that for project support, yeah,
Mhm.
for the
Yeah,
sustainability and for the
right.
sustainability grant program, the mid-sized organizations and large organizations do not include a request amount in their application. That's the awards are actually determined through a formula that we have. Um, so that's why it's important that you include the most updated financial information that we're requesting. For small organizations, though, there is that $10,000 uh, request cap. So, but again, just like Art Start, just like Arts Next, there is a one-to-one match for our sustainability. So if you're a small organization and let's say your budget is $18,000 a year, you can't request 10 because you got to have that match. So you can request 9. So whatever you're requesting, just make sure it's at least double. Your budget is at least double what you're requesting up to that maximum request amount. And a little bit more on Ohio Artists on Tour. The maximum request you can have is 15,000, but the but there's a caveat to that. The maximum you can request from a single artist is 10. So a lot of our organizations come in and especially our presenting organizations, they'll include their whole season of their visiting artists, that they're musicians and singers that are coming in or dancing, performing artists. Um, so that 15,000 maximum request can happen very quickly as you're looking at that. And like Jim said, your request can be a third of what their fee is. So if you're requesting 15,000, that means you have 45,000 worth of fees or compensation to the artists that are included in your application to Ohio Artists on Tour. Also, don't forget, I know Jim brought this up, you have to have a signed and executed contracts with those artists for it to be an eligible expense for an Ohio Artist on Tour grant.
Thank you all. Next couple questions are pretty quick answers. How do we know when the panel is reviewing our grant application?
It's a surprise. We'll tell you the day after. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
We notice everybody and we post it
Just
on the website. Yeah. So if you're applying, we'll tell you that. In fact, many of the panels have multiple days. So we will let folks know when their day is, and we'll post each day on our website. If you go to the grants calendar link at our website, you'll see the upcoming events and current events listed. We do email reminders to folks. Whoever the primary contact is listed in the application will receive that.
And in fact, we actually have a panel review happening right now. If anybody's interested in kind of getting a sense into the project process, our Arts Partnership Grant Program, which is actually housed under our Arts Learning Office, is doing a live panel right now. So feel free to check out the calendar section of our website to log into that Zoom after this one concludes.
Like free professional development on how to write a grant. It's really good.
Also, I know I've had applicants contact me to give them an idea of when their application will be reviewed on their panel day. We can give you a ballpark, but we really can only predict because the panelists run the meeting really. So I guess a good way to look at it is just split the list in half. And if you're in the first half, it's probably going to be before lunch. And if you're in the second half, it's probably going to be after the lunch break. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the order of review, when you're looking at the panel date that your application is scheduled to be reviewed.
And I'll say, as an organization that's gone through this before too, I think really, more than other organizations that we've submitted grants for, that it's really thoughtful feedback. Whether you are or not getting a grant, you get very thoughtful feedback, and it's really, highly constructive to help you write a better grant in the future. So, if you are going through the process and they unfortunately don't give you the grant this time, you're going to get a lot of good information to say, here's how, really this would be approached in the future if you were going to be funded, this, kind of feedback. So I think it's, really valuable to attend those meetings. All right, next question here is, are there any special considerations given to projects that are engaging Ohio artists as part of their grant?
I think all of
Ohio Artists on Tour.
grants
Ohio Artists on Tour
we're
does.
always encouraging to promote
Yeah.
Ohio artists and to compensate
Yeah.
the amazing work that they do. But
Mm-hmm.
Brianna, were you going to say something? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, no, you're fine. Yeah, I mean, for a lot of our, with the exception, Ohio Artists on Tour is the only one where they have to be Ohio based in
Mhm.
order to be eligible to request that funding. But all of our other grant programs, if you, I mean, we have such incredible talent in our state, so of course we'd love to see that, but it is not an ineligible thing. You can use out-of-state artists if you already have an artist identified, or if that's the artist you chose, that is okay. You can still come for Ohio Arts Council funding.
Next question here is there an applicable grant that would be used for recording and photographing musicians that are performing in communities?
I think all those grant categories would work. I think it's a legitimate expense. It's a production expense. And that's great because you're engaging in media and you're letting that project expand. I think it bodes well for the community engagement scoring criteria that's built into the applications. Yeah, it's just part of the project.
Thanks, Jim.
Mhm.
Next question here is, do you have any recommendations on measuring impact of a project that is open to the public? Is it acceptable to include web views, such as exhibit views online, social media views, in the scope of impact on a community?
Yeah, that's like if you post something on YouTube, you can track to measure the impact of that video of that live performance. Kind of ties to that last response I had. If you click the video, it'll have statistics for nerds, and you'll see how many hits and how long it was. So you can get data out of social media and other kinds of media and use it as a measurement method to see if you've achieved a goal, which connects to our defining measuring success scoring criteria. So we're hitting all the scoring criteria here, guys.
And our final question here, and it's a perfect one to end with, is there a newsletter to stay up to date with the Ohio Arts Council? And how can I sign up?
Quick answer is yes. I'm looking at Patrick. I think he's probably pulling up a link to send you so that you can get registered. We do have a newsletter to send you. So Patrick will here
Mhm.
send a link through shortly.
I think I will. Hold on.
And I lied. We have one more question here. So, if I'm interpreting this question correctly, are there grants available for podcasts? And this one is specifically asking about podcasts about history of music. Can podcasts qualify for any grant funding?
Sure. We've funded podcasts as elements of other projects. Um, a podcast is if it's about those topics, you're talking about an art form. It could be spoken word, it could be humanities, but yeah, I think so. And I mean, we have to see it in the context of an application, but my immediate reaction or initial reaction is yeah, it's a possibility. Mhm.
All right. That is the last question. So, once again, I'd like to thank everyone from the Ohio Arts Council, Brianna, Patrick, and Jim for joining us today.
Mhm.
And if Patrick,
I, you know what? I feel so inadequate because I can't find my link to
Don't say that. You're
we
more
we
than adequate,
can
my friend.
we can send it
Oh, here
along
it
with
is.
the
Here it is. Here
follow-up.
it is. Here it
Perfect.
is.
There you go.
Okay, here we go. Oh my gosh.
All right. When it finally
Felt like
shows
I,
up on my
it felt
end,
like it's
here
my
we go.
first day here at the OEC.
All
Mm.
right, everyone. I'm sending you the link right now in the chat to sign up for the newsletter from the Ohio Arts Council. So once again, just thank you all, Brianna, Patrick, and Jim, for doing this webinar today. Really great information for everyone. Please reach out to them. They love hearing from you guys about projects you're working on and how they can help fund you. It's probably the easiest organization I would say to approach at state government when this comes to financing. So please do it. And once again, thanks everyone for attending today. We'll see you at our next webinar. Thank you.